Welcome to Chemistry Lover, and this is the fourth video on qualitative spectroscopy series, the organic spectroscopy. In the previous two videos I discussed about IR spectroscopy in detail. Watch that video. Now in this video I am going to talk about ultraviolet and visible spectroscopy, which in short we call UV-Vis spectroscopy, because the wavelength whatever used in this particular spectroscopic techniques fall in between 200 to 800 nanometer. Now from 200 to 400 this is the UV range, and from 400 to 800 this is the visible range. That's why it is called ultraviolet visible spectroscopy. Now the first question is, what is the purpose of this spectroscopic technique? What information about a molecule we get from this particular technique? So actually this is the spectroscopy technique which was discovered at the very beginning. Before NMR IR, UV spectroscopy was first discovered, and at that time it was widely used in determining organic structures. But after that, when these more sophisticated techniques like NMR and IR spectroscopy comes, so then we don't use UV for structure determination because NMRs and IR, they are better at doing this. But nowadays UV is widely used in several other purposes. So the main information whatever we get from UV spectroscopy is the degree of conjugation in a molecule. So you can easily separate two molecules if one has only single double bond and another one is a conjugated double bond, or let's say you have a molecule which has several double bonds but they are not conjugated, and you have another molecule where all the double bonds are conjugated. These things you can easily distinguish by UV spectroscopy. And also the degree of aromaticity and how the aromatic ring is conjugated with other part of the molecule, that you can distinguish by UV spectroscopy. So the main power of this spectroscopic technique is to estimate or to determine the degree of conjugation in a certain molecule. Now let us talk about the basic principle of UV spectroscopy, what we do actually. So if you look at the energy range or the wavelength range whatever used in the UV spectroscopy, that actually fall in the electronic energy states of the molecule. So electronic energy states means the energy of different molecular orbitals. So let's say if you consider a simple pi bond, you have one pi orbital and another pi star orbital. I am just neglecting the sigma orbital, I am just talking about pi and pi star. So you have pi filled and pi star unfilled. Now when you provide energy to the molecule, the electron which is in the pi orbital, that absorb this energy and excited to the pi star orbital, and this is how the transition occurs. This is called electronic transition. So this electronic transition happens in the molecule when molecule absorb energy in the UV or visible light region, because that energy range actually matches with the different energy gaps within a molecule in different molecular orbitals, right? Now this is the basic principle, that in a molecule absorb energy and that energy is used for electronic transition. This is the fundamental of UV spectroscopy. Now before going into the detail, we should be familiar with few terms in which is used in the UV spectroscopy. But before that, let us talk about the color of molecule, the concept of color. We see organic molecule in several colors, and most of the organic molecules are either orange or yellow. Okay, so this is the most common color in organic molecules. What is the reason for that? Now first we have to understand what is the reason behind any color within any molecule. So when we see a color in a particular molecule, what is the origin of that color? So we have seen that any molecule will absorb energy either in the UV range or in the visible range, right? And whatever energy that molecule absorb, we actually see the complementary color of that light. So for example, if a molecule absorb light in the blue region, we will see the molecule as the complementary color of blue, which is yellow, right? and if you look at the organic molecules, if they are not very much conjugated, in most cases their energy levels fall in the region near 400, and which is actually the ultraviolet and UV and blue region. So that's why most of the organic molecules are orange and yellow in color. But as you increase the conjugation within the molecule, what you will do within as you increase the conjugation, the energy gap between one filled and unfilled orbital actually decreases, and that's why the energy which now the molecule will absorb, that will fall in the higher wavelength region, and you will see dark colors, right? So that's why more conjugated molecules, if you have more conjugated molecule, you will see dark colors. For example, azo compounds typically shows strong color. If you consider azo compounds, they shows strong red color. Why? Because in that case there is high conjugation in the molecule, and if you can increase conjugation further, you will see even darker color. Okay, now this is the concept of color. So from that one term comes out which is called chromophore. What is a chromophore? So historically chromophore literally means anything that exert color. So it is color imparting particle. Color imparting particle or group, that is called chromophore. But nowadays we use anything that can absorb light, we call it chromophore. So chromophore is actually molecular antenna. Any group that can absorb light is a chromophore. For example, pi bond is a chromophore, carbonyl group is a chromophore. All these groups which can absorb light is a chromophore, and chromophores are actually responsible for the color of a molecule. Another term is there which is called oxochrome. What is oxochrome? So oxochrome, they are not color imparting by their own. They cannot show any color, or they cannot absorb color by their they cannot absorb light by their own, but they can modify the color absorbing or color imparting property or light absorbing property of a chromophore. For example, if this carbonyl chromophore is added to some group like NH2, because nitrogen has lone pair, so there will be a conjugation and it will modify the absorption power of this carbonyl group. So this NH2 group is called an oxochrome. Similarly, OH group, OR group, all these groups are called oxochrome. So they are auxiliary groups. They modify the light absorption power of a chromophore, but by themselves they are not light absorbing. Now we know these terms, and now we will discuss about the basic principle or the actual mechanism of light absorption in the UV spectroscopy. So for that we will consider the very simple case of a carbonyl group. So in case of a carbonyl group, we have several molecular orbitals. First one would be sigma, then you have pi, then you have non-bonding orbital, and all these orbitals are filled with electrons. After that you will have pi star and sigma star, which are not filled, they are unfilled orbitals, empty orbitals, and this is the energy level. Now when the molecule absorb energy, transition can occur. Now several transitions are possible. For example, N to pi star or N to sigma star, these two are possible. Similarly, from pi to sigma star and pi to pi star, these are also possible. And another possibility is from sigma to pi star and sigma to sigma star. So all these 6 transitions are possible: N to pi star, N to sigma star, pi to pi star, pi to sigma star, and sigma to sigma star and sigma to pi star. So from all filled orbital, transition can occur to all empty orbitals, but not all these transitions are allowed. Now what is mean by allowed and not allowed? So there are some selection rules which will decide whether a particular transition is allowed or not, and 2 selection rules are there. One is called spin selection rule, which tells that that particular transition will be allowed where the total spin of your system will be unaltered, the total spin will remain constant. For example, let's say you are doing a transition from this field level to this empty level, and by doing that you are getting this arrangement. So let's say you are getting this arrangement. So you can see previously it was singlet, and after the transition also it is singlet. But let's say you do a transition like this. Let's say you have two orbitals where this orbital is already filled with electron, and now if you have a transition like this, so this is also allowed. But you can have another kind of transition where let's say this is filled, this is unfilled, and after the transition you are getting this arrangement. So now you can see previously it was singlet, but now it is triplet. So that means you are changing the overall multiplicity or overall spin of the system. So if you do that, if you change the overall spin of the system, that transition will not be allowed. So this is called selection rule, spin selection rule. Now if you look at this arrangement, in all these cases the selection rule will be same and it is spin allowed. So all of this transition from sigma, pi or n to pi star or sigma star, all these transitions are spin allowed. So now let us talk about the second selection rule, and that is the orbital symmetry, which is called orbital symmetry selection rule or symmetry selection rule. What is that? So in this case we say that transition from orbitals of same symmetry are not allowed. For example, from a symmetric orbital to another symmetric orbital it is not allowed, but from symmetric orbital to anti-symmetric orbital it is allowed. What is mean by that? So based on the symmetry of different orbitals, we classify the orbitals into two categories. One is called Gerade, which is represented as G, and another one is called Ungerade, which is represented as U. Now we will classify our molecular orbitals in these two categories. So if we take sigma and sigma star, so this is how a sigma orbital look like. Okay, so this is a sigma orbital, and you can see in this orbital, if you go to the center, you have a point of inversion, because from the center whatever direction you go you will get the same point. So it has point of inversion I, and that's why it is called Gerade. Similarly, if you consider pi star orbital, which is this one, here again you have point of inversion, because from the center if you go in either direction you will get the same point. So both this sigma and pi star, they are the Gerade orbital. Whereas if you now consider sigma star, so in this case you can see you don't have point of inversion, because from this side you will get shaded point, whereas from this side you will get unshaded. So it is called Ungerade. Similarly, if you consider pi orbital, you can see the upper lobe is shaded but lower lobe is not shaded, and that's why it is also Ungerade. So sigma and pi star, they are Gerade, and pi and sigma star, they are Ungerade. Now this selection rule says that from Gerade to Ungerade it is allowed, but from Gerade to Gerade or from Ungerade to Ungerade it is not allowed. That means from sigma to sigma star it is allowed. Similarly, from pi to pi star it is allowed. These two are allowed, but from sigma to pi star or from pi to sigma star, these two transitions are not allowed by this selection rule. So this selection rule is all about the orbital symmetry, and it tells that transition between two orbitals which are not of same symmetry, these are allowed, but transition between two orbitals of same symmetry, they are not allowed. Now what about this n sigma star and n pi star transition? And not allowed, this doesn't mean that no transition will be there. There may be weak transition. Not allowed means there may be weak transition. For example, this sigma to pi star or pi to sigma star, they are almost zero, but in case of n sigma star or n pi star, this is also symmetry forbidden transition, because they are not symmetry allowed, because n orbital, if you consider non-bonding orbital, they doesn't have any proper symmetry, so you cannot classify n as Gerade or Ungerade. So in this case also the orbital symmetry is forbidden, but in this case we get the n pi star transition in any any compound which has non-bonding orbital. For example, if you have a carbonyl group, you will always get n pi star transition, but the intensity will be weak. Okay, so forbidden transition doesn't necessarily mean there will be no transition. There will be transition, but it will be weak. Now what is the reason behind that? So in this case, because n orbital has doesn't have any proper symmetry, so you cannot apply the selection rule strictly here. So this is called relaxation of selection rule, and due to this relaxation, this n pi star transition is partly allowed, it is not fully forbidden. But for this sigma to pi star and for this pi to sigma star, this is completely forbidden. So our main transitions are now sigma to sigma star, pi to pi star, pi to pi star, and n to pi star, and n to sigma star. Now if you look at the energy gap, you can see this n to sigma star, this is huge energy gap, so this transition is not that much important. And sigma star transition literally means breaking of bond, because if you promote electron from sigma to sigma star, you will eventually break the bond, so that's why it is also irrelevant. So our point of interest is these two transitions, they are pi to pi star and n to pi star. These two are our point of interest, and whatever we will discuss on these two particular transitions. So our point of interest is pi to pi star and n to pi star. So this is the selection rule. Now let us talk about the laws of absorption, and which is termed as Lambert-Beer law or Beer-Lambert law, which is basically A is equal to epsilon CL. What is A? A is called the absorbance, okay, and it is defined as A is equal to log of I0 by I. What is I0 and I? So I is the intensity of the incident light. So if this is your sample and this is your incident light, this is called I, and after absorption some of the light will be transmitted, and that intensity, this is I0, and after absorption some intensity will be lost, so it will, so whatever transmitted light you will get, that will have intensity of I, and this is the intensity of transmitted light. So the ratio I0 by I, it is called absorbance A. This epsilon is called molar extension coefficient. C is the concentration of sample, and it is generally used in 10 to the power 6 molar concentration, and L is path length of the cuvette, and which is generally 1 centimeter. So these two are fixed. Now this epsilon is very important parameter, and for every compound there will be different epsilon values, and it has a range of value. For example, it ranges from 100 to 10,000 and above that, okay. And it is interesting to note that for the allowed transition like pi star, the epsilon value is above 10,000. Okay, and for the transitions like n pi star, which are not fully allowed, we cannot say it forbidden, but they are not fully allowed, and for them the epsilon value is generally, it is less than 1000, so below 1000, from 100 to 1000. Yeah, so this is the epsilon value, typical epsilon values. And epsilon value you cannot determine empirically, it is fully molecular property, and you have to do the experiment to determine the epsilon value. And when the UV data is plotted, how it is plotted? So in the x axis we have the wavelength, and in the y axis either we have A or we have epsilon value, and the data usually looks like this. So this is the UV value. Now if you have a compound like carbonyl group, and you have two signals for n pi star and pi star, how they will look like? So in this case you will see that one peak will be for the n pi star and another will be for the pi star. Now if you look the energy gap, this n pi star energy gap is lower, okay, but intensity of n pi star will be, n pi star energy gap will be lower, that means wavelength will be higher but the intensity will be lower. So that means the n pi star will be somewhere around here, but the for pi star the energy gap is higher, and that's why it will be at lower lambda value, but in this case the intensity will be higher because it is allowed transition, so it will be for the pi star. So this is the typical UV spectrum of a compound which has both n pi star and pi star transition, and this may be A or epsilon. Okay, so by looking at the intensity and the wavelength value, you can distinguish whether a particular transition is n pi star or pi star. So this is the thing. And so after that, what we will discuss the effect of different different phenomenon, like the effect of conjugation on the UV spectrum of a molecule, because the effect of conjugation is the most efficient effect or most prominent effect on any UV spectrum. For example, if you consider simple ethylene molecule and if you have butadiene molecule, how you will expect the change in the UV spectrum. So in case of ethylene molecule, we have the pi star transition, the usual pi star transition from pi to pi star, and in case of butadiene also we have pi star transition. But if you now look the molecular orbitals, in this case for butadiene you will have 4 molecular orbitals, namely psi 1, psi 2, psi 3 and psi 4, and you will see that the transition will occur from the psi 2 to psi 3, from HOMO to LUMO. In this case the psi 2 is the HOMO and psi 3 is the LUMO. So from here to here the transition will occur, and if you look, you can see the energy gap decreases. So in this case the energy gap is this one, but in this case it decreases. So as you increase the conjugation, the energy gap between HOMO and LUMO decreases, and that's why the wavelength of the transition will shift to the higher lambda value. So with increase in the conjugation, what will happen? The lambda will be shifted to the red region or to the higher wavelength value, to the high wavelength value, and this is called red shift. Okay, so this is called red shift. Why red shift? Because red light fall into the high wavelength region. So as you increase the conjugation, the UV spectrum will shift to the red light region or higher wavelength region. It is called red shift. Similarly, if you decrease the conjugation, it will go to the low wavelength region, and it is called blue shift when you decrease the conjugation. So these two terminologies are frequently used in the UV spectrum, red shift and blue shift. Similarly, so this is for the wavelength value. Similarly, you can have increased intensity of a spectrum, and if the intensity increases, it is called hyperchromic effect. Similarly, if the intensity decreases, it is called hypochromic effect. So these are some terminologies which are used in UV spectrum, so that's why I discussed them. So the effect of conjugation is very important, and this is also important when you change the acidity or basicity of a medium. For example, if you have simple phenol molecule, you will have UV absorbance at certain lambda value, but if you now increase the alkalinity of the medium, so if you add base in the medium, you will generate phenoxide, right? And as you generate phenoxide, due to the presence of oxygen negative charge, the conjugation increases, and this effect is more prominent when you have conjugation, like if you have a nitro group at the para position. So then what will happen? You will have extend conjugation when you increase the basicity. So this is how the extended conjugation will occur, and you will have increased wavelength in your UV spectrum. So this is red shift. Similarly, if you have some azo compound, because azo are excellent chromophores, so if you have azo compounds and you have conjugation, like let's say you have here OH group, and in this part you have, let's say, cyanide nitrile group. So this neutral molecule will have certain lambda value. Now if you increase the alkalinity of the medium, as you increase the pH of the medium, what will happen? This OH will become O minus, and then there will be extend conjugation. So if you do increase the basicity, you will have O minus, and now what you will get? You will get increased conjugation. So if the cyanide group I open, so this oxygen negative charge, it will be completely delocalized into this system, and you can see this is a extended conjugation, and due to this extended conjugation you will have increase in the lambda value. So in this case lambda 2 is higher than lambda, okay, and this is called red shift. Similarly, whatever compounds you get intense color, like the color of carrot, so in carrot you have a beta carotene named compound, so in that case you have a large number of conjugated pi system, okay, and that's why you get this intense red color. Okay, so as you increase the conjugation in your system, you will lower down the energy gap between HOMO and LUMO, and that will lower down the that will increase the wavelength of your absorption, and you will see bright color, or you will see you will see dark color, that is the color will be shifted to the red region, the red shift will occur. Okay, so this is the effect of conjugation, and in the next video I will discuss about the Woodward-Dine rule, where I will discuss the empirical calculation, how you can calculate the extent of conjugation in a particular molecule. Now let us talk about another important point, and that is the effect of solvent. Effect of solvent. What will be the effect of solvent on a particular UV spectrum? So for that I have to first write down the molecular orbitals energy again. So this is our pi, this is our n, and this is our pi star. I am not writing down the other orbitals because these three are our point of interest. Yeah, so these are the three orbitals. Now if you change the polarity of the solvent from like a non-polar solvent to a polar protic solvent, what will happen? So in polar solvent, these non-bonding orbitals will be very much stabilized, so it will lower down its energy and it will be somewhere around here. And the next high amount of stabilization will be for the pi star orbital, but for this the stabilization is lower than n and it will be somewhere here. So this is pi star, and the pi orbital is least solvated, so for this the stabilization is very less and it will be somewhere here. So this is the pi. So we are shifting from a non-polar solvent to a polar protic solvent. Okay, now what interesting thing here is, so previously we had pi star gap this, but now the pi star gap will decrease because the pi star will be solvated more compared to pi. So pi will not go as much as the pi star goes down, and that's why the energy gap between pi star decreases as you go to the polar solvent. But for the n pi star transition, the situation is reverse, because n is more solvated than pi star, and that's why in this case the energy gap actually increases. So from shifting from the non-polar to polar, what will happen? The pi star gap will decrease, so we will see a red shift. As the energy gap decreases, the wavelength will increase and we will have red shift, but for the n pi star it will have increase in the energy gap and we will have blue shift. Okay, so this is the effect of solvent on the UV spectrum, and this is very important. Questions will come from this particular topic. So I discussed about the selection rule, the effect of solvent and all these things, and in the next video I will talk about the empirical rule, the Woodward-Dine rule, and all other related rules regarding the UV spectroscopy. So for now I will finish the video here. If you like this video, give a thumbs up, share this video with your friends, and also comment down below how the video was, and thank you for watching.